If someone had told me that the child I threw into the river would return to haunt me, not as a ghost, but as a glowing star, I would have laughed in their face and told them not to insult my destiny. But life has a way of pulling chairs from beneath proud mothers like me. And now, as I sit in this empty house in Kabua, watching the evening sun crawl through broken blinds, I remember everything I did and wish I could drown in the same water that once swallowed my child. It was 2005. I was 22, unmarried, and pregnant with shame. The father was a rich married man who had promised me a flat in Guarimpa and a boutique in Wusa if I handled things quietly. I kept the child instead. I lived with my aunt in a one-bedroom face-me-I-face-you at Karimo. She sold rice by the roadside. When my belly started showing, she hissed every morning, get shame? Your mama dead, your papa gone, and na bastard you carry come give me? I wanted to believe the child in me would change everything. I told myself it was love I was carrying, not a mistake. But when the baby came, love didn't come with him. They brought the baby to me after the birth, and I nearly screamed. His head was too big, his nose flattened like it had been stepped on, and his body twisted in a way that made the nurse turn her face. He cried like he knew he wasn't wanted. Even the matron cleared her throat and asked, "Do you have a family member who can assist with special care?" I refused to carry him. For 2 days, I stared at the wall. No one came to visit. No gifts. No congratulations. Just whispers. He's cursed. She should take him to church. Some babies are better off returned to God. By the 3rd day, I made up my mind. I told the nurse I was taking him for sunlight. I wrapped the baby in Ankara and took a taxi to Jabi Lake. The driver didn't ask questions. I told him I was visiting the boy's father. It was a Tuesday. The lake was calm. A few people were selling suya and gala nearby. I walked to a quiet part of the water where the stones were slippery and tall grass grew. I looked into the baby's face for the last time. He looked up at me, eyes confused but quiet. "Forgive me," I muttered. "I'm setting both of us free." And with one cold movement, I dropped him into the river. He didn't cry. He just sank, silent like he agreed with me. I walked away, my slippers soaked, my heart hollow. I told no one, not even my aunt. She thought I gave the baby to a distant cousin in Jos. Everyone believed it. No one asked again. I moved on. A year later, I got married to a man who didn't know about the child. I had 2 more children, pretty girls with smooth skin and perfect eyes. I built a business, bought land, and joined the women's fellowship at church. Everyone said I was strong, wise, favored. But in the quiet moments when my children laughed too loud, I remembered the child I threw away, the one who didn't cry. 14 years passed. I had a new life in Lugby, a duplex I could proudly say was mine. My girls were in secondary school, my husband traveled often for work, and I ran a catering service that serviced ministries and banks in Abuja. I had earned my peace, or so I thought. Then, in the most ordinary way, my peace began to unravel. It started with a boy. I met him at a church program. I was invited to cater for Grace Shelter Ministry, one of those modern churches that hosted empowerment summits in big halls with fancy projectors and Instagram flyers. That Sunday, I was coordinating food service when the convener called the keynote speaker to the stage. A tall, striking young man walked in, barely 20, dressed in a sharp black senator suit. He had presence, the kind that makes people pause. They said he was a tech genius, a coder, built an app that helped children in rural areas access free education materials. His name? David Obiora. The name hit me like a glass falling in slow motion. David Obiora. That name, David, my mother had begged me to give him if he survived. Obiora was my father's name. I hadn't told anyone. I felt something in my throat shift. He took the mic and began to speak. His voice was calm, deeper than his age, like someone who had lived several lives already. He spoke about his childhood, how he was found abandoned near Jobby Lake by a fisherwoman, how he grew up in orphanages, how no one ever adopted him because of the way he looked as a child. He smiled and said, "People called me cursed. The first woman who took me in said I was too ugly to be seen in public. But I thank God she changed her mind and gave me to a woman named Mama Isioma, my true mother." My legs trembled. The church clapped. I walked out of the hall, my ears buzzing, my hands cold. I called my driver and told him to bring the car immediately. I didn't want to hear the rest. But something inside me said, "You owe that child your ears." So I stayed. David went on to tell how Mama Isioma raised him in Guagualada like he was her own, how she bathed him in herbs, took him to doctors, and prayed over his body for years. And slowly the strange features faded. The back straightened. The face blossomed. The skin cleared. He smiled. My miracle wasn't that I became handsome. He said, my miracle was that someone saw beauty in me before the world did. The congregation rose to their feet, clapping. I sat there, frozen. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying his voice in my head. That name, that story, that lake. Could it be? No, I told myself. It's coincidence. Abuja is big. People lie all the time. But guilt doesn't lie. A week later, I saw his face again. On TV, a news interview, then on Instagram, then in a youth magazine. His story was everywhere. And with every headline, the guilt stabbed me sharper. Then came the final blow. My second daughter, Anyanyeki, returned from school one afternoon and said, "Mummy, you won't believe who came to our school today. David Obiora. He spoke to us about purpose. He's amazing." Everyone wanted to take a picture. I forced a smile. "That's nice." She nodded. He said he's starting a mentorship program for teenagers in Abuja. I joined. He's even visiting parents next week to talk about the program. Can you believe that? I said nothing, but inside, I knew this was not coincidence. This was karma knocking softly, politely. I stayed up all night, scrolling through his photos, watching his interviews, reading his story again and again. He was the same child. He had returned. And now, without even knowing who I was, he was slowly entering my home, my family, my world. The day David visited our house in Lugby, the sky held no sign of storm. It was clear and bright, just like the afternoon I dropped him in the river. He came with grace, smiling, polite, dressed in a white shirt and navy blue trousers. Anyanyeki rushed to open the gate, beaming with excitement. "Mummy, he's here." My hands went cold. I fixed my scarf, smoothed my wrapper, and tried to steady my breathing. My heart was banging like someone was knocking from inside. When David entered, I couldn't breathe. He looked directly at me and smiled like he had known me forever. "Good afternoon, Ma. Thank you for allowing me visit." His voice was soft, but steady. There was no sign of hatred, no grudge, just light. He sat with my daughters, telling them stories, sharing plans for the mentorship program. I watched him from the corner, every movement reminding me of that day by the lake. The hands that once flailed underwater now gestured confidently. The eyes that once searched mine for love now glowed with peace. I barely spoke during his visit. I offered juice. I smiled faintly, but inside, my stomach twisted like laundry. After he left, I went to my room and wept like a woman who had lost a second chance. I couldn't sleep after that. Sunday, David came to our house. I lay awake till the call to prayer echoed from the mosque down the road in Lugby. My mind kept rewinding the way he smiled, the way he sat calmly with onyonyeki and amaka, like he belonged in our home, like he had always been a part of us. And that name, David Obiora, that was no coincidence. That was the name I gave that baby before I took it back with my sin. For the next 2 days, I walked around the house like a ghost. My husband thought I was sick. My girls noticed I wasn't talking much, but I told them it was stress from catering work. Inside, I was drowning in questions. Did he know? Was he sent to punish me slowly? Was this God's way of folding my secret into my own daughter's life? I needed answers, but answers came before I asked. I began avoiding church. The moment I realized David was truly who I feared he was, I started dodging anything that could bring us face to face again. I told Anyanyeki not to invite him over. I said I needed space, that work was too much, that the house was under spiritual cleansing. I knew she didn't believe me, but she didn't push. She adored David, like many others did. He was now almost a public figure. NGOs were writing about him. TV stations were calling him to speak. His story of being found abandoned near a river and growing into a tech pioneer was gaining attention. And I knew the story wasn't just about him. It was about me, too. The more people celebrated his survival, the deeper my shame rotted. It was a hot Thursday afternoon. My husband was away on site work in Karoo. The girls were in school. I was alone. That was when I heard a knock at the gate. I peeped through the curtain and saw him, David, standing at my gate with a calm expression and an envelope in his hand. I froze. I could have pretended I wasn't home, but something inside me whispered, "Face it. Stop hiding." I opened the gate slowly. He greeted me, "Good afternoon, Ma." I nodded stiffly. "Good afternoon." He looked around awkwardly. I was in the area. I wanted to drop this personally. He handed me the envelope. I took it with shaky fingers. "What is it?" I asked, trying not to sound nervous. "It's for Anyanyeki, a scholarship form for a tech camp. She qualified, but they need a parent's signature." "Oh," I said, "you didn't have to come all the way." He nodded. "I know, but I also wanted to check on you." He paused. "You've been avoiding me." That hit hard. I looked down. "I've been busy." He nodded again, but didn't say anything. Then he added, "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. "Yes, sure." He entered the house. I offered him malt. He refused. The air was thick. He looked around, as though trying to remember something. Then he sat on the edge of the couch. Not relaxed, not casual, just waiting. "Ma," he began, "I don't know how to ask this, but is there something you're not telling me?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" He looked at me directly. "Ever since we met, you've avoided me. Your daughter says wonderful things about me, but there's always tension." I looked away. "Do I remind you of someone?" he asked. I swallowed hard. My throat burned. He reached into his pocket and brought out a picture. Not the Ankara, just a black and white photo of a newborn, curled in a hospital blanket, with a nurse in the background. I recognized it. It was mine. My breath caught. "I found this in the envelope Mama Isioma left when she died," he said gently, "along with a few documents." I sat down slowly. I didn't recognize the woman in the picture. He said, "But when I met you, something felt familiar." Silence. Heavy silence. Then he continued, "The woman who raised me told me the truth before she died, that I was found abandoned. She didn't know who my mother was, but she believed she was young, scared, probably alone." He looked up again. "Are you that woman?" My eyes welled up, but I didn't answer. I stood up, paced the room, sat down again. My fingers gripped my wrapper tightly. My tongue tasted like dust. "Please," he said, "you don't have to be ashamed." I just want the truth. I finally looked at him. I didn't want to be, I said. Didn't want to be what? Your mother. He didn't flinch. I continued. You were born different. Everyone laughed. No one helped. My aunt told me I had ruined my life. Nurses whispered. I believed you were cursed. I was too young, too poor, too proud. The words rolled out like vomit. I wrapped you in that ankara. I told myself it was better to let the river take you than to carry shame for life. I was crying now. I left you, alone, cold, like you were nothing. He stared at the floor, eyes wide but still dry. I lied to everyone. I buried you in my past like trash. Silence. A long silence. Then his voice. But I didn't die. I nodded. I know. I know that now. He leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes for a few seconds. Then said, I thought finding you would bring anger. But all I feel is sadness. Deep sadness. He looked at me again. You're my mother. And yet you don't know the shape of my voice. You've never heard me cry, or laugh, or say, Mummy. I wiped my face. I wanted to forget you. He nodded slowly. But I couldn't forget you, even without knowing you. He stood up. I rose, expecting him to say goodbye forever. Instead, he walked over and placed something in my palm. I gasped. It was still soft, still smelled of dried thyme. I kept this, he said, not to remember the pain, but to remind myself that even things thrown away can survive. I held the cloth like it was breathing. I forgive you, he said, not because you deserve it, but because I need peace. My legs gave way. I dropped to the floor, clutching his feet, weeping. He knelt beside me and held me, not like a son hugging his mother, but like a man mourning the childhood he never had. We stayed like that for a long time. David visits on Sundays. Not every Sunday, just sometimes. He sits with his sisters, laughs, eats rice and stew. We still don't talk much about the past, but the weight is lighter. I started joining a women's prayer group. I confessed to the leader in private. She didn't judge me. She only said, now use your story to save others. So I do. I speak to young girls now, ones who hide pregnancies, ones who think shame is the end. I tell them the truth. No child is a mistake, but parents can be,